The Murdaugh family has long been a pillar of legal power and influence, their name often tied with justice and authority. Yet beneath this veneer of respectability, a chilling tragedy unfolded on the night of June 2021 that would shatter the family's legacy. Hello and welcome back to Briefcase Law, where we unpack the legal world one case at a time. At the heart of the story is Alex Murdaugh, a once prominent attorney, one from the long lines of the Murdaugh dynasty. The brutal murders of his wife Maggie and their son Paul at the family's hunting lodge sent shockwaves through the community. So, quickly, the investigation and trial process began. But, with one question which haunted everyone. Was Alex the killer? On the evening of June 7th, Maggie and Paul were found dead near the dog kennels on the family's sprawling property in South Carolina. The scene was gruesome. Maggie had been shot 5 times with a high-powered rifle, and Paul was killed by 2 shotgun blasts. Alex Murdaugh was the one who called 911, reporting that he had discovered their bodies after returning from visiting his elderly mother and dying father. His voice on the emergency call was distraught, filled with anguish and disbelief. To many, this was the image of a devastated husband and father. Alex claimed he was not at the family's dog kennel, the crime scene, until he discovered the bodies. However, investigators uncovered significant discrepancies in his account of the night. Cell phone data and crucial video contradicted Alex. His son Paul had recorded a 50-second video near the kennels just minutes before the murders, capturing the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This video, locked on Paul's phone with a simple passcode, his birthday, was recovered months later and placed Alex at the scene of the crime, when he claimed to be elsewhere. Alex later admitted that the voice was his, undermining his alibi and raising suspicions around his truthfulness. Further cell phone data deepened the doubts. The victim's phone locked at 8:49 p.m., indicating the murders occurred shortly after. Additionally, Alex's phone records and GPS data showed unusual activity, which is inconsistent with the timeline he claimed. It was found that he drove faster than usual to his mother's house after the murders, possibly to fabricate an alibi. Fitness tracker data then showed he took 283 steps in 4 minutes, contradicting his claim of waking from a nap and heading directly to his car, suggesting he was active and possibly moving around the property during the critical time frame. Forensic evidence then plays a crucial role. Gunshot residue was found on a blue raincoat Alex allegedly hid at his parents' home shortly after the murders. Forensic scientists testified that the raincoat contained at least 38 gunshot residue particles, consistent with being near a recently fired gun. Smaller amounts of these particles were found on Alex's hands, clothing, and even the seatbelt buckle of his car. While this alone cannot prove firing a weapon, the quantity and distribution raised serious questions about his involvement. The murder weapons were never recovered, but the particle evidence suggests the proximity to gunfire around the time of the killing. The prosecutors primarily built their case upon circumstantial evidence. Their goal is to prove Alex guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Therefore, they pointed out Alex's financial troubles, as he was accused of embezzling millions from the family law firm, a scandal which threatened to destroy his career and reputation. They created a fury. Alex was desperate enough to distract from his financial crimes and maintain his standing by orchestrating the murders to garner sympathy and deflect attention. Paired with the gunshot residue, footage evidence, cell phone data, and inconsistencies in his storytelling, he appeared guilty. On a quick side note, the key terms that are crucial in understanding this case include reasonable doubt, which refers to the standard of evidence required for a jury to convict a defendant, circumstantial evidence, which supports a conclusion indirectly, and burden of proof, which lies with the prosecution to establish the defendant's guilt. Alright, back to the video. The defendants reminded the court of Alex's character. They argued that he was a loving husband and father who fell victim to sloppy law enforcement work. Buster, Alex's surviving son and the defendant's first witness, testified that his father was destroyed and heartbroken.
What was his demeanor?
Yeah, his demeanor was, he was destroyed. His heart
heartbroken. I walked in the door and saw him, and gave him a hug, and just broken down.
Buster's survival questions why Alex would only kill some family members but leave him alive. Why spare Buster, who stood to inherit significant assets including a $10 million life insurance payout that was part of an assisted suicide scheme Alex supposedly did to benefit Buster? This argument casts doubt on Alex's motive and suggests that the case against him is not as straightforward as the prosecution claims. They added that this was not believable, that Alex had enough time to commit the murders, dispose of the evidence, and then drive to where his alibi placed him. Here, the defense is trying to prove against the prosecution by allowing for reasonable doubt in Alex's action. They add that with no eyewitnesses, no hard proof, and no blood found on his clothing that night, the state's case was nothing but a theory. The defendants are trying to point out that this case is primarily relying on circumstantial evidence, which is weaker than direct evidence such as eyewitness accounts. Over the course of 2 days on the witness stand, Murdaugh testified in his own defense, a high-risk move for any defendant because of several reasons, including, number 1, cross-examination. The prosecution gets the opportunity to question the defendant, potentially exposing inconsistencies or weaknesses in their story. A skilled attorney can undermine the defendant's credibility. Number 2, self-incrimination. This ties with the point above where a defendant may inadvertently reveal information that can be damaging to their case, even if they believe they are providing helpful testimony. And number 3, juror perception. Some jurors may view a defendant's decision to testify as a sign of guilt, particularly if the testimony was unconvincing or overly emotional. It shows that the defendant may not have many witnesses to help testify, intensifying their guilt. And number 4, finally, control of narrative. By testifying, the defendant relinquishes some control over their narrative, as the prosecution can subtly shape the context of their statements during the questioning. The first 3 points are irrelevant towards a skilled attorney like Alex, as he's familiar with the process and the tricks the prosecution may throw at him. Furthermore, Alex had plenty of witnesses to back up his case and create a convincing narrative, were he to be guilty. However, it is on the 4th point where he fell short. Alex completely lost control of the narrative with all the evidence brought up against him, presenting him as an unreliable witness and untruthful defendant, putting into question all of his statements and timeline thus far and in the future, which eventually led him to admit that he was at the dog kennels that night shortly before his wife and son were killed. Shortly after, he conceded that he had lied several times to investigators, citing a long-standing addiction to prescription painkillers that made him paranoid, which is why he committed years of theft to clients and people he loved and cared about, so that he can further fund this. In the end, he remained strong in maintaining his innocence, tearfully referring to the victims as Mags and Papa, saying, "I would never intentionally do anything to hurt either one of them."
I'm sorry to both of our families. Most of all, I'm sorry to Max and Papa. I would never intentionally do anything to hurt either one of them.
After less than 3 hours of deliberation from the jury, they returned the verdict. As a reminder, this case took place in South Carolina, where murder is classified as either first degree or second, where the former involves premeditation, while the latter may not require the intent to kill, but does involve the reckless disregard for human life. The court must decide which standard can be applied to Murdaugh's actions. The judge must also consider other factors when imposing sentences, including the severity of the crime, the defendant's criminal history, and the impact on the victims. In Alex's case, the combination of financial fraud and violent crime likely influenced a harsher penalty. The judge found Alex Murdaugh guilty on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during a violent crime. This means that the court found him guilty of committing murder on 2 separate occasions while possessing a weapon during each violent crime. The judge proceeded to sentence him to 40 years in federal prison for financial fraud, which will run concurrently with his state prison term. Additionally, he was sentenced to 27 years for state financial crimes and received consecutive life sentences for the murders of his wife and son. To translate, the court found Alex guilty of his embezzlement crimes and sentenced him to 27 years in prison for such an offense, while also serving 2 life sentences in prison without the opportunity to be released on special purposes of good behavior for murdering his wife and son. Alex Murdaugh's case is a complex one, part tragedy, part mystery. It is more than just a murder trial. It is about power, privilege, and human capacity for both deception and redemption. While the pivotal question still lingers, was Alex falsely accused, it invites us to examine the complexities of human nature and the intricate web of circumstances that define his case. This story challenges us to consider not just the facts, but the moral implications of guilt and greed. And that's our case closed for this episode. Thank you for tuning in to Briefcase Law.